Welcome to Global Village Talk. We have a great show planned for you today. Today's topic is good hair versus bad hair. We know that racism exists, as does sexism and ageism, but is there similar discrimination and repression in our society based upon one's hair texture?
Welcome to Global Village Talk. Our topic today is good hair versus bad hair, or pelos menos, pelos buenos. That's Spanish for the same. Joining me for our discussion today, consultant, an author and writer, and resides in New York City. Also with us today is Marcia Fingle. Marcia is an Abrams model. She has accounts with Lexus, and I'm sure you've seen her face grace many magazines and publications throughout the country. And she's also an anchor for a local television cable network.
Connected back to something Marcia was saying about raising our children, and that piece I mentioned earlier about the little girls, the story of my
means. So I think there's this whole idea of needing to raise our children with a stronger consciousness.
Well, on that note, we have another clip that features Dr. Bell Hooks. She's a social critic and she's a cultural critic, and she speaks very eloquently on the notion of self-esteem in the African American experience. We're going to roll the clip to Dr. Bell Hooks.
In Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem, I talk about the fact that a central part of self-esteem is self-acceptance. That begins with accepting your body, liking it the way it is. African Americans born into a culture of white supremacy that devalues that which is dark, that which is kinky, often feel we can only be beautiful if we are fair and if we have long hair. So that there's a built-in encouragement from the mainstream culture for African American children to dislike themselves the way they are, to want to change. A parent was just telling me recently that when she wants her little girl to wear her hair natural in an afro, her little girl just cries and cries. She wants to have long, straight hair.
Is there a new aesthetic emerging around notions of so-called good hair and bad hair in mainstream media representation?
What's really amazing is that despite all of the diversities of hairstyles and hairdos, the notion of good and bad hair as it relates to white supremacy has really remained intact. That especially in Black culture itself, and I don't just mean African American culture, it's really a kind of global aesthetic. As we see when you see documentary films of many places in Africa where people are straightening their hair more or wearing wigs, we see that aesthetic that is associated with power and privilege becoming a central norm, even though there's diversity around it. We have to remember that even in many archaic Asian societies all around the world, having darker skin is associated with being a laborer, because you get darker skin by working out in the sun. So if we think about many of these sort of ancient cultures of Asia and Japan, for example, the woman who was tan was the woman who was seen as lower caste because she was out working in the sun. If we think of India and the whole sort of darker skin of the untouchables, we think about Brazil in terms of who lives in the poorer neighborhood. So on one hand, that aesthetic of light skin versus dark skin, straight hair versus kinky hair, really abounds in the world. And it's interesting that in terms of a global village, it's only been recently that many people in the United States have had a chance to look at Australian Aborigines, whom you see have very dark skin often, but very, very straight hair, so that we see that the very notions of what's genetic are questioned when we really look at people within our global village, when we look at people being who they are, or as I say when I sign my book, Happy to be Nappy, loving yourself just the way you are. We see that there is a diversity of Black aesthetics, but in the culture of white supremacy, straight hair, long hair, continues to define the norm of what we think is beautiful. I think that, hair is as much an industry in the world as anything else. Millions and billions of dollars go into hair products, selling styles. So one of the things you see is that once people realize that they can make lots of money by the horsehair that goes into the long extensions, as well as black beauticians realizing that, hey, I can make way more money if I'm doing some elaborate hairstyle. So you get this diversity of hairstyles. Certainly dreadlocks have become much more popular in the United States, but very telling, you know, dreadlocks, which are a part of the Rastafarian religious sacred meaning, get translated in the culture of white Western imperialism. It's just a cool look. So when you have a book on dreads, you know, you can have someone with blonde dreads symbolizing, you know, the fun of having locks. But the issue is so deep because even that doesn't change the prevailing aesthetic that long straight hair is beautiful, and that won't change until we begin to have the healthy self-esteem that says, I feel good about myself, so my choices can be playful, they can reflect the mood I'm in. They're never about trying to make myself better than I already am.
Thank you, Dr. Bell Hooks.
Dr. Bell Hooks has presented one of the more eloquent cases for black self-esteem in the last 2 decades. What did you think about that clip, Liv?
It's very moving, and I also wanted to